I think we need to stop the third world coming to Britain. We cannot take any more of it, can we? We have simply had enough.
In just 1 year, 443,995 shoplifting offences were recorded across England and Wales, the highest figure ever. That's over 1,200 thefts a day, or one every 71 seconds. In London alone, cases surged past 102,000, up more than 42% in just 12 months. Store shutters rise, CCTV cameras flicker on, and staff step inside already tense. This is no longer petty theft. It is organised, relentless, and happening in plain sight. Across the country, small protests begin to form as anger grows over a system losing control. By 8:47 a.m, the pattern is already clear. At a Greggs store in Wood Green, staff watch helplessly as offenders walk in, take food from the shelves, and leave without paying. No masks, no panic, no fear. This is now routine. Across London, similar scenes unfold every morning. Retail workers report being told not to intervene, not to chase, not to challenge, for their own safety. According to industry figures, over 70% of retail staff have faced abuse, and nearly half have been threatened. What was once theft has become open defiance, unfolding in daylight. By 9:30 a.m, one case begins to symbolise the wider breakdown. Patrick Verry, 33, was repeatedly arrested in connection with thefts at Greggs Wood Green, reportedly 7 separate incidents within a short period. Court records show he was later issued a ban from all Greggs stores across England and Wales. Yet despite multiple arrests, there was no lasting deterrent. Another offence followed each release. For staff, the message was clear. The system was not stopping repeat offenders. For criminals, it sent a different signal, that consequences were minimal and the risk was worth taking. By late morning, the situation begins to shift from theft to intimidation. Across London, retail staff report a sharp rise in aggressive behaviour. According to the British Retail Consortium, the UK now sees over 2,000 incidents of abuse or violence against shop workers every single day, with weapon-related incidents up more than 180% compared to previous years. At several stores, including branches of Greggs and nearby supermarkets, staff describe offenders becoming confrontational within seconds. Knives are used earlier in confrontations. Verbal threats escalate quickly. In many cases, employees are instructed to step back and allow thefts to happen rather than risk injury. Security officers confirm the pattern. They know the police response time, one guard explains. They know the thresholds. And they know we're not allowed to intervene. By midday, some stores begin closing early. Others restrict entry. Outside, small groups gather, angry at rising prices and falling safety. What was once a retail issue is now spilling into public space. The sense is unmistakable. This is no longer an isolated crime. It is a system under strain, and the pressure is building. By 12:30 p.m, the scale of the crisis becomes impossible to ignore. Across England and Wales, police data shows that nearly 290,000 shoplifting cases were closed in the past year, without a suspect ever being identified. Fewer than 18% of reported thefts resulted in a charge. For offenders, the message is clear. The odds are in their favour. Retail workers describe the same pattern again and again. Offenders return to the same stores, sometimes multiple times a week, fully aware that consequences are unlikely. Some openly state that even if they are arrested, they will be released within hours. According to industry surveys, over 90% of violent incidents in shops now go unreported, largely because staff believe reporting makes no difference. The financial impact is staggering. Retailers are losing an estimated $4.2 billion a year, combining stolen goods and security costs. Small businesses are hit hardest. Many now spend more on surveillance, guards, and insurance than on wages or stock. For some, the numbers no longer add up. By early afternoon, the strain shows. Shops close early. Staff leave shifts shaken. Police resources are stretched thin, prioritising only the most serious incidents. What remains is a growing gap between law enforcement and daily reality. At this point, the problem is no longer crime alone. It is confidence. Confidence in protection. Confidence in justice. Confidence that the system still works. And as that confidence fades, one thing becomes clear. This crisis is no longer contained. It is accelerating. By mid-afternoon, the situation begins to mutate into something far more dangerous. What started as organised theft now spills into open confrontation. Groups involved in repeated shoplifting grow bolder, more aggressive, and increasingly hostile toward authority. Police describe a clear shift in behaviour. Offenders are no longer trying to avoid attention, they are challenging it. In several areas, officers responding to retail thefts report being surrounded, verbally abused, and in some cases physically obstructed. Shop fronts become flashpoints, arguments escalate, objects are thrown. Tensions spill onto the pavements as crowds gather, drawn by the prospect of confrontation and chaos. What had been criminal opportunism begins to resemble disorder. Police unions later confirm the scale of the damage. Across multiple forces, dozens of patrol vehicles are damaged in a single week, windscreens smashed, body panels kicked in, and emergency equipment destroyed. The estimated cost of repairs and replacements runs into millions of pounds, diverting already limited budgets away from frontline policing. In some areas, officers are forced to withdraw from retail zones altogether and redeployed to prevent wider unrest. Inside the stores, fear dominates. Workers describe thieves returning in groups, taunting staff, daring them to intervene. Some incidents escalate into scuffles. Others end with entire shelves stripped, while staff stand frozen, instructed not to engage. The line between theft and riot blurs. Police sources admit privately that response capacity is breaking down. Units are stretched thin. Calls stack up faster than they can be answered. Officers are told to prioritise life-threatening incidents only, leaving shoplifting, intimidation, and vandalism effectively unchecked. The message on the street becomes unmistakable. Enforcement is no longer guaranteed. By late afternoon, anger spreads beyond criminals. Residents gather outside affected stores, frustrated by closures and rising prices. Tempers flare, shouting matches erupt between shop owners, customers, and suspected thieves. In some areas, police form lines not to arrest, but simply to prevent further escalation. The psychological impact is profound. Officers speak of exhaustion. Retail workers describe dread before every shift. Communities feel abandoned. What was once seen as isolated criminal behaviour now feels like a loss of control, a system unable to protect those who follow the rules. And as daylight begins to fade, the question grows louder on every street. If this is happening in broad daylight, with cameras rolling and police present, what happens when the sun goes down? At 5:30 p.m, the mood on the streets has shifted. What began as routine theft now hardens into open defiance. Groups linked to repeat shoplifting incidents gather near retail zones, no longer trying to blend in. Their presence is loud, confrontational, and deliberate. Voices rise, tempers flare, storefronts become flashpoints. Police units report a surge in disorder calls tied directly to retail crime zones. Not just thefts, but intimidation, property damage, and confrontations with staff and bystanders. Officers are forced to respond in numbers, forming lines to keep crowds back while shop owners pull down shutters in broad daylight. The cost to policing is immediate and severe. Internal assessments show that public order responses linked to retail crime now consume tens of thousands of officer hours each month, costing tens of millions of pounds annually in overtime, emergency deployments, and vehicle repairs. Patrol cars are damaged. Protective equipment is replaced. Entire shifts are redirected from neighbourhood policing to crowd control. And still, the pressure continues. What alarms authorities most is the attitude of the offenders. These are not panicked individuals acting out of desperation. They move with confidence. They argue with security. They film confrontations. Some shout that the police won't do anything. Others dare the staff to stop them. The sense of consequence has evaporated. Officers on the ground describe a clear shift in behaviour. Where once suspects fled, they now linger. Where they once avoided attention, they now seek it. The line between theft and public disorder is increasingly blurred. As tensions rise, frustration spills outward. Shop workers confront police, asking why arrests lead nowhere. Residents gather, angry at the decline of once safe shopping areas. Arguments break out between customers and offenders. In several locations, officers are forced to intervene simply to prevent fights from erupting. Behind the scenes, commanders face a brutal calculation. Every officer sent to manage retail disorder is one less responding to violent crime, domestic abuse, or emergency calls elsewhere. Resources are finite. The pressure is relentless. By early evening, parts of the high street resemble controlled zones rather than commercial areas. Doors are locked, staff leave under escort, patrols remain visible long after closing time. This is the turning point. Not because of one incident, but because of a pattern that has become impossible to ignore. The anger is no longer isolated. It is spreading, and with each passing day, the message grows louder. Not just that crime is rising, but that authority itself is being openly challenged. As evening falls, the streets grow quieter, but not calmer. Shutters are down, lights are dimmed. Police vehicles idle at junctions that, only hours earlier, were scenes of confrontation. What remains is not relief, but exhaustion. A collective sense that something fundamental has shifted. This was not an isolated day. It was a snapshot of a wider reality taking hold across the country. Retail workers head home shaken, some questioning whether they will return the next morning. Shop owners calculate losses, not just in stock, but in confidence. Customers rethink where they shop, when they go out, and whether it feels safe to do so anymore. The high street, once the heart of British communities, feels fragile. And behind it all sits a growing silence. A silence from institutions stretched thin. A silence from systems overwhelmed by volume. A silence that criminals have learned to interpret as permission. This is not simply about theft. It is about the erosion of boundaries. When offenders no longer fear consequences, when police are forced to ration their response, and when ordinary people stop believing that reporting a crime will make any difference, something deeper begins to fracture. The impact reaches far beyond retail. Communities lose trust in law enforcement, in leadership, in one another. Workers lose dignity, forced to stand aside as abuse becomes routine. Businesses lose faith, closing doors not because of profit, but because safety can no longer be guaranteed. And perhaps most concerning of all, a new normal begins to form. A normal where confrontation is expected. A normal where theft is tolerated. A normal where disorder is managed rather than prevented. Officials speak of strategies, reviews, and future reforms. But on the ground, the reality is immediate. Police officers are stretched beyond capacity. Courts are clogged, resources are finite, and every unresolved incident reinforces the same dangerous lesson, that the system can be pushed further. This is the moment the country finds itself in, not on the brink of collapse, but in a slow, grinding erosion of order that happens day by day, shop by shop, street by street. No single event will mark the turning point. No dramatic headline will announce it. Instead, it will be felt in smaller ways. Boarded windows, earlier closing times, empty high streets, rising fear. As night settles in, the question lingers. Unanswered, uncomfortable, unavoidable. How much more pressure can the system absorb before it breaks? How many workers must face threats before protection becomes real? How many communities must retreat before safety is restored? Because what unfolded today was not an anomaly. It was a warning, and whether it is heeded or ignored will shape what Britain becomes next. If you've watched this far, then you already understand this isn't just another news story. What you've seen today is not an isolated incident, and it's not an exaggeration. It's a pattern repeating across towns, high streets, and communities that once felt safe. This video isn't about fear, it's about awareness. It's about asking difficult questions while there's still time to ask them. Because when crime becomes routine, when disorder is tolerated, and when silence replaces accountability, the cost is paid by ordinary people, workers, families, and small business owners. So, don't look away. Talk about it. Question it. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you seen this happening where you live? Do you feel safer or less safe than you did a few years ago? The future of our streets won't be decided by headlines or promises, but by whether people are willing to speak up before the damage becomes permanent. Your voice matters. Use it